In that case, we ought to, like, just for the record, mention that it's August 12th and we're in Bloomington, Illinois at Bob Tucker's house. And I'm Dick Smith and this is Bob Tucker. Tom Veal is behind the camera and Laz Eldis is laughing from the back. And we're taping this for the opening ceremonies at Chicon 2000 and we don't know what else.
Well, let me point out one thing, sir. His or her name will not be mentioned in the cast. But sometime during this interview, do not be surprised if you see a cow wander by along that fence behind us. Just please don't cut it out. Let the cow have her moment of glory. It'll be the first time, to my knowledge, there's been a cow at a convention. Now, carry on.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about Chicon 1 and, you know, kind of also about your role in it. So you chaired Chicon 1, right, Bob?
No, I was on the committee. There were about 5 of us on the committee. 4 Chicago high school boys and me. I was an old graybeard of 26 at the time.
Oh, so you really controlled it and you had some front people up in Chicago?
I was the secret control. And Mark Reinsberg was the chairman, and Earl Korshak, I believe, was the secretary-treasurer. At least he wound up with the money.
Okay.
I wound up with the registration book. I stood by the door, and as each fan came in the door, I thrust the book under their nose, asked them to sign in, name, city, and state, which they did. When the con was over, I went back and counted names, and we had 128 signatures. But there were not 128 people there. I found out later that Ray Palmer, who was editor of Amazing Stories, signed his name and then 4 of his pseudonyms. So there were about 123 people there, perhaps 122 people. Big crowd. And the difference, the sharp difference between that year and this one is our gate was free. There was no charge to walk in. And I'm told that you guys want something like, what, $65 or $70 to get in now?
That was to vote. It's $195 at the door, Bob. At least we hope they're paying that.
Hey guys, come back to my convention in 1940. We were cheap. We'd let you in free.
Well, if the time machine were there, Bob, I know we'd all like to go.
You realize we'd have more than 128 people, too.
Yeah.
And if Ray Palmer can do it, you can too. The next time you come to my convention, sign as many pseudonyms as you wish.
Well, you know, that may still be happening at the Chicon 2000. It's hard to know.
Pseudonyms?
Yeah.
Phony names?
Oh, all kinds of foolishness.
Are you going to pad the attendance figure?
Oh,
as
no.
Some other conventions have done.
No, I don't think that'll be necessary. There ought to be plenty of people here.
Let me ask you, what do you expect in round numbers?
It's hard to predict in advance. Round numbers 5,000, I guess, is a good guess.
I guessed between 5,000 and 7,000.
Yeah.
That was my guess.
I think 7's going to be on the high side, but we really don't know how many will come at the door. And that makes it hard to predict. We know there are over 4,500 pre-registered at the cutoff, pre-registered to attend at the cutoff.
Then my guess is closer to 6,000 than 5.
Could be.
Do you have enough program books for all of them?
I understand the print run is 7,000, and as we're taping this, they go to press this weekend. So
you've got it made then.
Everything ought to be okay.
You
know.
Now let me ask you, sir. You didn't just stray in here unprepared. I dare say you have a list of questions in your hot little hands. Would you like to ask one? I may not answer, but would you like to ask it?
Oh no, I hate asking those questions, but that is why we came.
Keep it clean, please.
Well, the thing that struck us when doing research about the first Chicon and about Chicago fandom in general is something that was written in Fancyclopedia. And Fancyclopedia 2 says that Chicago, despite its 2 conventions, because it went to print after the second Chicon, the Windy City was always fairly quiet as far as fan activity, and it mentions the Windy City Vampires, which was an old group that existed, but that the Chicons were put on by special convention organizing committees and not by, you know, clubs that had, you know, otherwise a fannish existence. Now, you were talking about, you know, being sort of the behind-the-scenes controller of that first committee. You know, why did you have to do that? Why wasn't there a club?
I don't know why there wasn't a club. Perhaps there hadn't been enough time as yet. The 4 teenagers that I mentioned, I believe, were all high school boys.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 or 2 of them had been to the previous convention in New York in 1939.
Uh-huh.
They wanted one of their own. But for some reason, I hesitate to second guess them, they didn't think that 4 high school boys could get away with the nerve of it, which is why they recruited me. I was the old man of 26, and I realized later why they wanted me. I was the one person who could legally sign checks.
Okay.
But there was no club unless there was a high school club at the time. I believe they went to New Trier. I believe all of them went to New Trier. That's the correct pronunciation.
That's how they pronounce it now. The high school's still big, and there's still fans going there.
And so they and me formed a new fan club, a statewide fan club called the Illinois Fantasy Fictioneers. We sold memberships for 50 cents apiece, which we used to publish our bulletin, our fanzine. And in essence, in reality, that the Illinois Fantasy Fictioneers was the sponsoring body. In actuality, those 4 high school boys put it on in Chicago, and I was there to stand around and look dignified and assure the hotel people, yes, there was an adult on the premises. Thank you.
Pass it over. I'll make it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I thought it was for
you
me.
keep it.
No, you do
Not
it, please.
for you.
Okay.
As now, you know what you're supposed to do. Remember the old fannish tradition. Get that hand up, sir. Are you ready?
I gotta wait for you.
No, we'll do it again when it gets to me.
I could be holding my hand up for hours.
No,
I've been stuck in that
We're
position
going to do
before.
it right now. You have just
Okay.
had your drink. Are we ready? Smooth. Go thou and do likewise. Mine's coming.
Okay. We were talking about that first convention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how did the 4 high school boys and you? How did they win the convention? There wasn't any voting. There wasn't any of this 3 years ahead of time stuff.
Nope. There were no rules in those days. None of that red tape.
I mean, they just had one. So
the New York convention had been a success by the lights of that time, by the lights of 1939 and 1940. And Earl Korshak and Mark Reinsberg and a third party, I believe it was Bill Hamlin, but I'm not quite sure about Hamlin.
Mm-hmm.
Too long ago and my memory isn't that good. Decided they wanted one too if they could get it. There was an annual convention in Philadelphia called PhilCon. So 3 or 4 of us hopped in a car and drove to Philadelphia in October of '39 and asked the fans there at the convention if they would give us a vote of confidence. We gave them our outline of our plans.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to have a world convention next year in Chicago, and we do thus and so, you know, the usual advertising.
right.
And would you give us a vote of confidence? Everybody voted for us that voted at all, where there were no negative votes.
Okay.
So we won the convention that way. And it was that easy. All you need to do is go to a regional convention, get the people to hold up their head and say, yeah, you can have one, I'll be there. And 128 of them showed up.
Well,
Thank you.
You can keep that one.
Now I get to smooth. Oh, that's smooth. In Chicago in 1940, there were 2 fans there from Denver. They couldn't afford the price of the bus ticket, so they had hitchhiked in, hitching rides on boxcars. They came in a freight train,
wow.
right in the boxcars. They came into Chicago, into the convention. They wanted to put on the World Convention the following year, 1941, in Denver. So they stood up in our hall, in our business meeting, made their pitch, and we all said, yeah, you can do it. We all took a vote, and they won it.
Right.
I'll back out, don't worry about it.
Now, when I talked about a cow walking by the fence a while ago, I didn't expect another car to show up. Think nothing of it, kids. Traffic comes through here all the time, but when they see us sitting out in the driveway like this, they either back up or they run over us. You want to see the tire tracks on the back of my neck?
We'll wait.
All right.
There'll be a chance. No, so that was almost formal. That was one Worldcon picking the next.
It was the first time, well, it had to be the first time it was so
Yeah.
early, that yes, we got it by going to PhilCon in October of '39. Denver won it by actually coming to our convention and asking for it.
And then from then on, I guess it passed from Worldcon to
From
Worldcon.
year to year to year. And there were people there from Los Angeles, people in Denver in '41 from Los Angeles, who asked for it the following year in '42. And they would have had it if the war hadn't intervened.
Mm-hmm.
But the war hit the United States hard in '41. So by mutual consent, everybody said, let's wait till the war is over, not knowing what year it might be over.
Right.
And by 1946, lo and behold, it was over. So we had a convention in Los Angeles. The first Los Angeles convention was in '46. I went to that one. And here memory has to work for me, poor memory. I think there were 300 or 400 people at that convention. I'm not sure of that figure, but I think so. About 300 to 400.
That seems on the high side. But
It could well be. Maybe there was only 200 to 300.
Yeah.
But you see, the California fan population was much larger. And they had San Francisco as well as San Diego to draw from.
Mhm.
And they had, well, they certainly had far larger than either New York or Chicago or Denver had before them. I'm sure of that. Denver only had about 90 people. That was the smallest one.
No, but Chicago has always been a good place for Worldcons.
Yes.
Chicago's had the most. The one we're recording this for, the one we're about to have, will be the 6th. No other city has had that.
Well, that's because those of us fans in Illinois are special. We are little angels. If the sun wasn't so bright, you could see our halo. And so whenever the Chicago people want a convention, everybody all over the world puts up their hands and says, yeah, go ahead, you can have it, like so. Say yes, Tom. You notice the silence behind the camera?
I did. On the other hand, the selection for Chicon 2000 was pretty overwhelming, so I can't argue with you.
Mm-hmm. I could mention one more thing. You're familiar with the Duff Fund, bringing a fan from Australia to Chicago for the convention?
Sure am.
Aha.
Yeah, after all, it sent Leigh and I to Australia.
Guess who is coming
Brought
to
us
see
back,
me
too.
before she goes to Chicago?
I know who's coming because I gave her directions how to get from the airport to the train.
Good.
I know that Kathy Cupid will have
Yes.
been here by the time this video airs.
Kathy is coming down to spend 2 or 3 days with my wife and I. And also that same week, perhaps the same time Kathy is here, there's a bunch of fans from St. Louis driving up, and they're stopping to stay overnight with us.
Okay.
And then after the convention is over, there's a bunch of fans from Chattanooga on their way home are stopping to stay over with us. The people that put on Liberty Con. Can you see the logo on the cup?
Sure.
Uncle Timmy and his crew.
Uh-oh.
And
That
they're-
ought to be a good party.
They're stopping over with us. So I won't be in Chicago, but there are 3, 4, 7, somewhere between 7 and 10 fans are going to come to see me. This is the case of the mountain coming to Mohammed. I'm very pleased with that.
Well, we wish you could be at the Chicon.
May I tell you something about this? My very first convention ever was at PhilCon in October of 1939. 60 years later, I went to a convention in October of '99, last year at Kansas City. And I realized that I'd been going to conventions for 60 years. And an expression from the late Charles Burby came to mind. 60 years, that's not too many. And I decided he was wrong. It was too many, so I quit. After the Kansas City convention was over, I just quit dead, cold turkey. And I haven't been to one since, but I don't expect to go to another one. I had physical problems too, which helped me make up my mind.
Yeah.
But think now, Dick, think of yourself. Do you believe that if you last 60 years in fandom, keep going to conventions for 60 years, you'll want to go to your 61st or your 62nd? Are you sure?
I don't know, Bob.
I
didn't
didn't
get there
want to.
first.
All right, your turn is coming. Your time is coming.
I got a few years to go.
Yes. But think of it, 60 years at conventions. What could Chicago this year possibly have new that I haven't already seen?
Oh, I'm sure
Let's
we
hear-
have some things in mind.
Let's hear Tom answer that one.
Well, we have Bob Eggleton painting a picture on Saturday.
On a canvas.
He's going to sit in the lobby at the Hyatt and do a painting from scratch.
Is that Mike Harlan writing in the lobby?
It's sort
But
of
better.
yes.
Well, at least the picture will be large enough that the audience around behind him can see it. Harlan wouldn't let us look over his shoulder.
I don't
until
blame
the story
Harlan.
was finished.
Yeah.
And once upon a time, it brings to mind an anecdote. Once upon a time, at the mini-cons in Minneapolis, they kept bringing me back as a Toastmaster and a fan guest and a progress. They ran out of excuses. And they they realized I had not yet been an artist guest of honor up there. So they brought me back one year as the artist guest of honor and told me I had to do a picture on stage.
Okay.
They put up a chalkboard for me. Huge chalkboard, large enough that the audience could see what was happening on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Vogel was editor of Analog at that time. So I brought him into the story, into the joke. I told him what I was going to do and asked him if he'd be my straight man and get up and run forward and buy it when I finished. I was going to paint a picture on the chalkboard and sell it to Analog. And he went right along with it.
Okay.
After I painted the picture, I told them that Gordy Dixon was going to write a sequel. Do you remember a story called The Cold Equations?
Sure.
Gordy had written a story called The Hot Equations. How to get to Mars without dumping the stowaway. And while I'm telling the story, I'm writing it on the chalkboard, drawing pictures on the chalkboard of the sun and the spaceship going down around underneath the sun. You see, it's cooler under the sun than over the sun. So if you go under it, you can cut corners without burning up. When I had finished with that, Ben Bova jumps up from the back of the room, runs down the aisle waving a $5 bill, yelling, "I'll buy it, I'll buy it." Comes up on the stage, gives me the $5, turns around to two big guys sitting in the front row who were plants, says, "Take this to New York." They run up on the stage, grab the chalkboard, and out the door with it. And that's how I got by, how I justified being artist guest of honor at Minneapolis.
So what issue of Analog did the story run in?
Well, they're still holding it, they're waiting for Gordy to write the Hot Equations.
I see.
Of course, you realize after Ben Bova left the magazine, the new editor or the new art director may not have liked the paper that much, so he gave it, rather than throw it away, they donated to some convention to help raise funds. So that may be hanging on some fan's wall, or be sitting in some fan's living room right now.
Well, either that or some third graders may have erased it.
Yes, and there goes my masterpiece.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever been artist guest of honor. I can't draw flies, you know.
Well,
That isn't the return I expected on that one.
From that one?
Yes.
No, I'm not going to make a response about the honey.
Dick, you are a gentleman.
This is supposed to be a family video.
Ah, yes, it's going to be shown to a mixed audience, isn't it? Alrighty, we will not bring up the flies again. What's your next question, sir?
I'm not sure I have a next question, but let's talk about that second Chicon and how you were the chairman of that one.
You got to tell me the year and who else was running at the time.
Hand me my fanzine from the table.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Would you like step number 9?
That's the one I like.
Would that be Judy May's convention?
I think she was the third one.
Judy May and B. Mahaffey ran one of them.
Yeah. The TASFIC in 1952. No, that was her convention.
That was Judy May.
Yeah.
Judy May, all right.
At the Morrison Hotel.
Uh-huh.
Hugo Gernsback was the guest.
Yes.
And this says there were 870 people.
I believe that's the convention that I was parliamentarian. I think that was my job at that one.
That convention must have been huge.
800?
Yeah, the NOAACon before it was only 200, and all the previous ones, NorwestCon was 400. So Chicago had a huge jump at that point.
That may have been the first convention where the figures were deliberately inflated. It goes on all the time, sir. Old fans just know it and shrug and laugh it off.
Well, I doubt they doubled themselves, though.
No. I'm willing to believe they were close to 800, because I remember the theater. It was the seating programming took place in a auditorium, a theater-size auditorium, with the seats rising in tiers, so forth. And it was a large auditorium, could easily seat 400, more than 400. And the speakers were down on the stage, as in the theater type. I think, was that 1952?
That was 52.
That was the one where Walt Willis came over for the first time and sat in the audience, and he was amused by the Toastmaster, whose name I shall not mention. It was not me. The Toastmaster was trying to introduce notables. He was standing on the stage at the microphone, trying to introduce notables in the audience. The Toastmaster's eyesight wasn't that great, and he missed more people than he found. And he would say, the joke at the time was, look, Joe Pro is here. Nobody stood up. And then we'd yell, he's down in the bar.
Is that where that tradition started?
Yes. All the pros that were not there to be introduced. It was the custom in those days to introduce every pro there at the opening ceremonies, or at a session soon after. And Walt Willis was vastly amused by the number of people that the Toastmaster could not see and could not find. And he immediately, when he went home and did his trip report, he referred to this person by name and called him Weak Eyes so-and-so, Weak Eyes Joe Fan. And the label stuck. And to this day, the man is still in fandom. To this day, the old-timers who know him well and are not afraid of getting hit in the nose call him Weak Eyes Joe. Don't you dare do it, though.
Well, I still haven't figured out who you're talking about, but I guess I can go research who was Toastmaster there.
He will be in Chicago this coming September, Labor Day.
We'll cut it out of the tape, Bob. Tell us now.
Oh, I don't trust you. No. He will be there because he told me that he was going, and in fact he wrote to me and asked me for certain props.
Okay.
So evidently he's on the program. He must be on the program because he wanted these props with him. So all you need to do is read your program book and find out who was there in, you said 82? Okay. Who did the
52?
Who did 52? Who did the MC work in 52? And who's doing the same man on the program for your convention? Ha!
Well, between the many tracks of programming that we've got, that won't be easy. We've got a lot of people on the program now.
Yes, but how many of them were there in 52?
Well, 870 according to this.
Really?
According to this chart. So, no, but maybe we can puzzle it out. What do you know?
I don't want to get hit in the nose, and I don't want you to get hit in the nose.
Oh, I can risk it.
Hey, here's the easy way to do it. Go back and read some of Walt Willis's writings. They've been reprinted again and again and again. And find the one where he does his trip report on the 52 convention. It's in there. He tells about sitting in the auditorium, listening to that man on stage and watching that man on stage.
And you say he names names?
Yes.
That would have been what they did in those days. No reason to pull punches because fandom wasn't so big.
Is that in the Willis? But there were fist fights in those days. We don't want to resurrect.
There were fist fights?
Oh, yes.
At the convention?
Behind the scenes of the convention.
Oh, you mean among the committee?
No. Well, there may have been. There still are. Let's go back to this PhilCon that I went to in 1939, my very first convention. We came within a hair of having a fist fight on the floor there.
Between who? You can name names. It's okay.
Oh, they're all dead now, so it's easy. One person was Will Sikora.
Okay.
The other person, I believe, was either Sam Moskowitz or Jimmy Teresi. There was somebody at the front of the hall making a speech. Somebody from the opposite. It involved two New York fan groups who hated each other's guts. You'll find this in
New York fandom hasn't changed a
Yes.
bit.
And a person from one group in New York was making a speech in which he made sliding references to the other group from New York. Will Sikora was a member of the other group. He jumped up in the rear of the hall, came tearing down the aisle, rolling up his sleeves as he came. He was going to punch that guy's lights out. Now, this is my first convention. I'm sitting there in the front row thinking, wow, this is what conventions are like. I want more. But when he got to the front of the room, people intervened and wouldn't let the fight start. You realize now why I've hung around conventions for 60 years, waiting for another fist fight on the floor?
Well, maybe you should come up to Chicon. Just among the committee, we ought to be able to have plenty, and then there'll be all those people in the audience.
Don't forget the pie.
That's right. There's going to be pies at opening ceremony. You know, some of the pre-supporters paid extra to have the right to pie somebody on the committee.
And are you people on the committee going to wear aprons, or do you take it as is?
I've mentioned to Tom as we drove down here that that he seems like a likely target because he'll probably have to be there with a coat and tie on, and a coat and tie is about as attractive to whipped cream as anything.
True, but I worry about his glasses. They may break his glasses.
Well, hopefully the pies will be soft.
Let's hope so. And let's hope there's nothing buried in the pie.
Well, I believe the committee, since it's an official pie, it'll be supplied by the committee and it'll be okay. It's unlikely to actually have strawberries.
If it's only custard, let's save his glasses and his contact lenses of anybody who's
no, I think they may be as simple as whipped cream. On the other hand, I don't know if that's been done at an opening ceremonies before. Plenty of weird things have, of course.
Most often, I've seen, what's the stuff that comes out of squirt cans? It looks like strings.
Silly string?
Silly strings. I've seen that done again and again and again.
Because you go to a lot of conventions in Kansas City.
Yes.
They seem to like silly string in Kansas City.
Remember, 60 years of conventions, and I've seen it several times.
Yeah.
And it's got to the point where you can see it coming and it's well on the point.
I believe that. I was thinking about that big hall and all the fans gathered in it, and how conventions have changed since then. What do you think
Which year?
Well, even let's say 52.
Right. That huge theater hall.
Huge theater hall and 800 some people, and they got together for one meeting, right? Everybody was together.
Yes, more than one, because I recall going back again and again for various.
Right, but there was just one session at a time, wasn't there?
I don't recall double-track programming.
That came a lot later. I'm not quite sure when.
Now, I can't help the cars going by. I apologize for those. But I did want one of my neighborly cows to stroll by while you were here. I wanted you kids to see it for yourself so you'd believe it. Now, it'll be on this side of the fence, this fence behind me. If the cow comes by at all, she will be, not yet he. She will be. And not to worry, cows don't attack you unless you attack them first. I realize you are city boys, you may be afraid of cows, but don't bother, don't be afraid of them.
I grew up in Wisconsin, Bob.
Really?
Cows are the source of all cheese, and I love cheese.
Were you a country boy at the heart?
No, I was a city kid, even there.
Ah.
But I went to school with people who rode cows.
Rode cows?
Well, when you don't have a horse, you have to ride what you got.
Have you ever had a chance to milk one?
I think I had a mistaken encounter with a cow that way once. I did not demonstrate any particular skill. I was a sick boy.
All right, then you'll have to take my word for it. Milking a cow is fun. You can do amazing things with those.
Yes.
With the milk.
For a family audience.
A good farmer, a good milker. Usually when we milk the cows, there's a bunch of cats sitting around in the barn behind, waiting for their share of the milk. And a good farmer can aim right at the cat's mouth and squirt the milk right into the guy's mouth. So I've never been able to do it, but I've seen him do it. Now, I admire those guys. That is what would you say? Expertise.
Yeah.
When you could hit a small cat's mouth with a string of milk without half trying. Do you realize, Tom, some of this conversation is going to have your audience scratching their heads and wondering what the devil is going on, and other parts of the audience are going to say, well, that should have been cut out. That's nasty.
Well, I'm not particularly worried. We can trim out the good parts.
Uh-huh. I said, not let the audience see it.
Yeah.
This is another good reason for me not to go to Chicon. And they can't hit me in the nose.
Nobody's going to hit you in the nose.
You will protect me, wouldn't you?
We would protect you. Now, at this point, you're walking fan history. That's 60 years of convention going. We could put you in the exhibit hall stuffed.
Hey, which brings up something to mind. Guess who the very first mystery guest of honor was at a convention? Chicago, 1940 again.
Mystery guest.
Uh-huh. Not advertised. It was put on at the last moment. We had a real skeleton, an articulated skeleton. One of the club members, there was a club in Indiana called the Decker Dillies. Their mascot was an articulated skeleton they had gotten from a doctor's office. They brought that skeleton to the convention with them. We put it up on the stage, and that convention, during the entire week at the convention, that skeleton sat on a chair on the stage looking at the audience.
Oh, dear.
And the best part was he never made a speech. So ours was the only convention to have a skeleton in attendance.
I see.
Now, in a sense, he could have been the first fan guest.
Weren't the Decker Dillies? It seems to me I've read something about them in a fan history book.
You'll find.
Weren't they a club of
Yes.
young ladies?
No.
No?
No, there were some young ladies in the club, but those that I met were men.
Were men.
And
Okay.
they were from Decker, Indiana, and you'll find them in one of Harry Warner's histories.
I believe Harry Warner mentions two young ladies from Decker,
Yes,
Indiana.
it could well be. There was a carload of them came up to Chicago. Say 4 or 5 or 6 of them.
Mhm.
And they brought the skeleton with them in the trunk.
The skeleton didn't get to ride in the front seat and pay the toll?
I sort of doubt it.
Oh, well.
Well, now, just a moment, sir. You gave away your age. What toll?
Well, that's
In
true.
1940, Route 66 still ran to Chicago, between Chicago and St. Louis. And those of us who drove up on 66. No tolls on 66 in the good old days. The people who build the toll roads and realize there's money to be had weren't in office yet. So Route 66 was free.
Well, it wasn't as fast, I suppose, either.
No,
As
I probably made
the
all of
interstate
50
now.
miles an hour driving up there. And that was good speed because we had to share it with the trucks.
Yeah.
2-lane road, by the way. 66 was a 2-lane road. And there was, if you got behind the truck, there was little chance of passing them because there was too many trucks coming the other way, coming south. And, oh man, but you haven't lived till you've driven on 66. I can see, Dick, I can see you looking forward to it.
Well, I'm pretty sure we drove on some of it on the way down
You
because
could
the
well have
interstate runs over some of its route. But
Yes. And if you look off to the right when you're going home, between the interstate on the left and the railroad tracks on the right, when you parallel the railroad tracks, look in between. Old 66 is next to the tracks. If you would park your car and walk over to the tracks, you would cross 66, didn't you?
Okay. I actually remember driving it on my way to St. Louis
Yes.
a trip when I was was pretty young.
You can still drive on parts of it. They have it open for tourists. Yes.
Now, time to get the old cars out or something.
Mm-hmm.
But driving up that way, that makes me think back about again that second World Con. Julian May was chairman.
Yes.
And you were the power behind the throne.
Oh,
Not that time.
Of course.
You were that
Well, we
time.
kept it quiet. See, by that time I had learned that if you want to run things, you have to keep it quiet and not let the audience know.
The audience being the rest of the committee, huh?
And the people in the audience, the fans who attended the convention, everybody resents the power stick, the real power behind the throne. So those that succeeded and lasted for 60 years kept it really quiet. Now, the next convention was the Chicago Convention, I believe was Earl Kemp's convention.
That would be 62, Chicon 3.
Once again, he came to me and asked for my advice, and I told him how to do it. Everything. And he went over 1,000. There were more than 1,000 people there for that one, I believe. And I think that was the convention, Earl Kemp's convention, where Jerry Purnell made his first public appearance, and I have this right, he was the administrator of an IQ test for whoever cared to take it. They gave him a separate room, and this would be the second track of programming. There were a bunch of fans in there taking an IQ test. I was smart enough not to do it, because I didn't want to show up the instructor for being smarter than he was. But I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that was Jerry's first public appearance at a convention. And you won't find that in Harry Warner's book. Some things Harry was smart enough not to mention.
I thought Harry didn't mention anything that wasn't written about in fanzines, which
Not
is
only-
why
well-
Harry's only about 50% right.
Well, not only that, but Harry, being a newspaper man, trained to avoid lawsuits, was very careful not to explain things. There would be, for example, you'll find a reference to Rosebud in one of his books, probably the first book covering the 1940s. He doesn't explain what Rosebud is. He doesn't explain how it was invented. He doesn't explain how it got into fandom. There's just one single sentence saying, and that was the convention, or that was the meeting where Rosebud was introduced to fandom. And he drops it. You're left wondering, what the devil is he talking about? Harry was afraid of lawsuits. This was his newspaper training. And he knew better than to tell the Rosebud story. And I'm not going to tell it here. Keep in mind, kids, I've been married for 40-some years, and I want to stay married, so I'm not going to tell you. You see, Leah? There are some things you do not tell your husband. There are some things you do not tell your wife. And I do not tell my wife the Rosebud story. But there will be people there at the convention. For example, Mike Blixen. Get him off in the corner and ask him to tell you. He won't tell you the Rosebud story.
Well, he won't have time. He's bidding for a World Cup now.
Ah, but tell
Or
him.
at least he's pretending to.
Then what you guys should do, if you want to hear the story, butter him up with little tiny white lies. And say something to this effect. Mike, you want my vote, don't you? Well, he'll say, yes, of course. Very well, Mike. You can have my vote if you will tell me the Rosebud story. Trade the story for the vote. And he'll tell you.
And then, of course, the ballot's secret, so you can still vote for Cancun afterwards.
You want to. But if everybody votes for Cancun, Mike is going to know there's a large number of liars around. And he's told that if he tells the Rosebud story again and again and again, he's going to hate the folks.
Well, let's see if he can even remember it.
I bet you he does. Indeed he does. The people involved in the Rosebud story, unfortunately, are no longer with us. Walt Liebscher has passed away. Mary Beth has passed away. And another woman, the only name I remember was Skeeter. Her nickname was Skeeter. They're all passed away. So there's no point in bringing them up. You can't ask them. But you'll have to ask people who have heard the story repeated at early conventions. And I've known Mike for at least 25 or 30 years, so I know he's heard it at one of the early cons. I do recall, WorldCon was in Australia about 1975. I do
That
recall.
would be the first one in Australia, I guess.
Mhm. And I recall when I flew to Australia, he was one of my seatmates. That is, he was in the plane just a couple of rows away.
Mhm.
And I knew him before we met on that plane together, before we rode on that plane together. So I've known him for close to 30 years. And anybody that I've known for that many years has to know the story. If you were, not you, because you weren't old enough at the time, I would hesitate to tell children.
I believe I've heard that.
If you were a little whippersnapper. But here again, it's a case of poor Harry just drops it in one line. Would you like to sit down with us?
No, just wondering about the sun.
It's beginning to burn me.
I've been thinking that too.
Can we go sit in the shade for a while?
I think we can do that.
All right.
Okay.